All right, so I'm here with John Roll Jr. and we've talked to his uncle Steve and talked to a few of your cousins. Wish we could have got your dad on camera,
Yeah.
but you guys probably have one of the biggest farming families in the county. When you start figuring it out, what I always thought was amazing was that, because how many brothers total?
6.
6 brothers that all went on to farm on their own separate farms.
Yep.
And then every single one of those farms were farmed by the next generation, at least, for a while.
Right.
That's almost unheard of.
Yeah, and then Paula and Eddie Fiedler milk.
Yeah.
That's my dad's sister. They still milk. They do real good. They get along good and do a very, very nice job. Matt and Mike Fiedler.
Yep.
They're a cousin too, so I mean, I think there was only 2 of my dad's sisters that didn't move off to a farm too.
Yeah, because I'm looking at all the Hooper
Yeah.
side, Mary and Norman, and then you got one of your aunts was over in Hastings too, right?
Yep. Kathleen, Roddy, and they farm.
Yeah.
Yep. Joanne married a doctor, and Linda married a carpenter from Minnesota. Other than that, all the sisters went off on farms. Married a farmer too.
Yeah, and like I said, the farms are still.
And all their kids are farming.
Yeah.
To this day. So
a ton of. I had
86 first cousins, and each, except for the 2 sisters, Linda and Joanne, they all farm, and their kids are taking over them farms or trying to.
Yeah, it is not something you see these days very much, and all of them at one time or another milk cows.
All my dad and his brothers did.
Yeah.
Yep.
And Norman didn't milk, but his sons went on.
His kids did.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all milked. Well, Roman and Lee Allen and Eldie and Kevin all milked.
Yep.
At one point.
So, yeah.
No, Lee Allen is milking still.
Yep.
Does a very nice job.
Yeah. The farm we're on here, this was the one next door to the home farm.
Yeah, my grandpa moved down on Jay's, where Jay farmed, in the late 30s. He bought that farm.
Okay.
And started milking there. And that's where all the kids were born.
Yep.
And then, I think it was in the 50s, he bought this farm from a guy named Jess Johnson.
Okay.
And then, so they farmed them both. And then when Dad got back from the Army and got married, then Grandpa sold him this. And Jay got the home farm, and Grandpa moved over on 29.
Yep.
And they moved, I think they took some switch cows or whatever over to 29, and Grandpa and Steve milked there.
Yep.
When Steve was still in high school. Then when Steve got married, he moved down to where he's at on 29.
Yep, and then he milked cows there.
He milked cows there. Yep.
And then Dick bought his farm. Don bought his farm.
And
Tim bought his farm too.
Yep. Shortly after. It all happened after the Vietnam War and all that.
Yeah, because Dick was in Vietnam.
Yep.
Was your dad in Vietnam?
No, my dad enlisted before Vietnam, and when the Vietnam War started, his 3 years was up. He signed up to go to Vietnam.
Okay.
And then they sent him home because his time was up.
Okay.
He was in Germany. They were in Germany over that was a Bay of Pigs thing where
that was in Cuba, but it was Cold War.
Yeah, but they were in Germany over I don't know.
Probably with Berlin, because
Something
Berlin
with
was
that.
split. Yep.
Anyway, that's where he was. And then Vietnam was getting going, and he signed up to go there. And then they sent him home because his 3 years were up. And then Dick went.
Yep.
And Dick got enlisted, and he was in Vietnam, and he contacted back home and told Jay to get into the reserves because it was fucking horrible.
Yeah.
He didn't want him over there.
Yep.
So then Jay did that and kept him from having to go. If you enlisted into the reserves, you didn't have. They kept you there in case they needed you, right?
Yep. Something like that. Yeah.
So I don't know how it totally worked out, but that's what happened. Anyway, he survived and came home, and then Jay and Dick milked for a while together at the home farm, and then everybody started getting married, and that's why they went to got their own farms and had their own families going then.
Yep. So when did your dad? So this barn down here, the single-story barn, did your dad build that barn?
My dad built everything on this. There was nothing here but an old house and an old barn.
Okay.
So they took the old milk barn down and the horse barn down, and they used the lumber out of it to build the hay shed that's here.
Well, okay.
And my grandpa did that, but I think they did that before my dad owned it. And they took the old barn down, they sorted out the lumber, and they poured that foundation around that shed with the little cement mixer.
Yep.
And my Uncle Tim talks about it all the time. He said that was his job, was to keep the cement mixer full. He was little. He kept the cement mixer full the whole time, and they kept it. They had it all formed up, and they went all the way around that. Took the old lumber, put it up, and then bought new steel for it.
Okay.
And put that up out of the old building. And then there was an old house here. So Grandpa had cattle up here, and I think Grandpa built the little silo that's by the barn.
Yep.
To feed heifers up here in the winter. And then when Dad bought the farm, he built the barn alongside the silo.
Is that a Lester's?
It's a Lester's. They delivered it, and my dad built it himself.
Okay.
He was he built everything on this farm. All the that granary was the kitchen off the old house.
Really?
So they put that cement block foundation up, and then they dragged that kitchen off the old house up on there, and he made that into a granary. And then he had a big pole shed up here that the snow wrecked. He built that himself. He ordered the barn from Lester's. He put that up himself. Did all the cement work and steel himself.
Really?
In there. That antique shop he built himself. The house is a Wausau, but he did the basement himself.
Dick's house was too, right?
Yep. They cement blocked the basements and the foundations themselves. And then they ordered the house and put it on it, and then he put this room on it himself.
Okay.
My dad was a great carpenter. He liked that. Doing that stuff. I don't know how he got it all done. He ordered that barn with a hay mow, but he had heifers springing. So he canceled the hay mow so he could get the barn done before the heifers were springing. He had heifers out here bagging up, and he didn't have the barn done.
So did he buy cattle then when he got home from the military and then started building the barn?
I think he bought some heifers and had them here and got them bred, and then was going to get the barn going.
Okay.
And they were bagging up, and he didn't have the barn done, so he canceled the hay mow to get the barn done. Then we got his heifers fresh. Then he bought a few cows here and there on sales.
Then I suppose he didn't have a hay mow, so he built the silos.
Well, he still pissed and moaned. Just the year before he died, he was pissing and moaning because he wanted to build the barn, and he wanted to buy a new baler and hay racks.
Yeah.
And one little silo for corn silage and the other one for high moisture or shelled corn, ground feed. Well, he was at FHA or
FMHA.
Back then, is that what it was?
Yep.
And the guy's like, you know what? He said, that's getting old fashioned. He says, I'll do this, but he says, I want you to build a silo for haylage and a silo for corn silage.
Yep.
buy a chopper and wagons, so he did. But he goes, I bought all that stuff, and he goes, and then I had to buy balers and hay racks anyway.
Right,
Because you
right.
needed it anyway.
Yeah.
So his plan was to do it inexpensively and not have the big debt load, you know,
Yep.
which I don't know if it mattered in the end or not, but he said he wouldn't have had us. He wanted to milk a certain amount of cows, feed them baled hay and corn silage, and not have the expense in all the silos and the stuff there. But he said they did all that, and he said we got going really well, being really productive. I mean, when he was young, his cows were nice. He'd open the door. They'd walk in, and number 1 was here, and number 40 was here, and they were right in order.
Yep.
All the way around the barn. And he said as soon as we got thumping and getting rid of the debt, he said they made him move out of there, out of that bank, out of that.
Oh,
loan.
FMHA.
Yeah. Oh, you're doing good enough.
Yeah.
You're doing good enough. You need to move out of here. So he went to the land bank.
Yeah, PCA.
And he said it went to the land bank in the late 70s, and interest just went
Oh, yeah.
bonkers. And he said all of a sudden, he says we're making all the same payments. We're doing nothing but paying interest.
Yeah.
And he was so pissed about that till today. And I don't know why they would do that.
Well,
I don't know. I never understood that, why they wouldn't just let them guys get them loans done through them.
so
Like if you were failing, they'd keep you forever.
right, FMHA was supposed to be the lender of last resort, and it was I think it started kind of like during the New Deal, where it was supposed to help these, struggling sharecroppers or whatever to
Right.
get going. And yeah, then
Well, that's what it was a young farmer loan.
yeah,
But it's too bad they wouldn't have just left some of them guys alone and let them get paid off. Dad said as soon as they got cranking, they made a move to a different lender.
yeah, wow,
And then the interest thing went nuts in the 80s.
oh yeah,
You know how that-
late 70s it exploded.
Them guys,
and then-
I don't, just growing up here in the 80s, I don't think he did anything but pay interest for quite a few years down there.
Oh, well, I always
Yeah.
say that, like, when we were kids, like, you think about, like, late 80s, if somebody bought a new tractor, like, the whole county talked about that, because, like, people didn't buy a new tractor.
Right.
Like, I mean, even to have I can remember, 85, 86 is when all the farm equipment mergers happened, right? That's when Ford, New Holland, Case IH, et cetera, all that got started. And gosh, if somebody had like a Case IH versus an International,
Right.
you were like,
yeah.
wow, or you see, your Uncle Don had, he was a New Holland guy.
Yeah.
And he had a bunch of Ford New Holland stuff. And I'm like, wow,
Right.
that's pretty new. And, it was tough times in there.
It was, as far as the interest thing goes, it kind of screwed up a lot of guys,
Yeah. But
in that era.
in a way, though, as long as you're getting by,
Right.
it doesn't seem so bad, does it?
No, and they did. He always got by. We never could have a brand new tractor or nothing, but you were talking about that when he bought my 4020 that I own.
Yep.
I bought from him. He bought that on an auction out at what was his name? It's Matt Roll lives there now. Tim Roll. They were good buddies.
Yep.
And Tim helped him a lot, and the guy died, and they had an auction there.
Yep.
And my dad was out there helping him get lined up for this auction, and that tractor was on it. Well, we got home from school, and he came home from there to do chores, and we were doing chores, and my grandpa drove in his Caprice, and he handed a ticket out the window to me, and I'm like, what's that? And he goes, your dad bought a tractor. And I was like, really? It was a 67 4020, and I was like, did you really buy it for another 4020? Well, he says, I told him to go to 6,500 on it. And he goes, what do you do? He goes, 67. He goes, oh, all right. So, like, we just couldn't wait to get that thing home, you know.
Oh yeah.
It was like the hugest deal probably in my lifetime. Of
Well, that was
like you were talking, it was like we never had nothing new. We
oh
kept everything going and didn't start. I mean, we always had plenty, but we were never. You could never run to town and get a new chopper wagon or nothing. You know, you're always
well, and this is something that a lot of the young guys now need to hear is. So you and I grew up in that time frame when, people didn't look at farmers. You weren't wealthy.
no.
It was you sustained. You got by. That's
Right.
it, right?
Right,
And we both wanted to farm.
right,
We saw that and wanted to farm.
Right.
So that's the difference where, like today, some of these people look at farmers and they think, oh, these guys are, multimillionaires or whatever. And it's like, you want to do it even when you.
and I don't pick on nobody. These guys out farming are doing great.
Yep.
They do good jobs. A lot of fancy iron out there.
Oh, absolutely.
But in my own personal situation, I was raised real frugal. You make what you have work.
Yep.
Kind of because we had to.
Yep.
And like right now, I get picked on once in a while because I still plant with a 4-row. Well, financially makes no sense to me to move to. I have a thing against narrow rows or nothing, or 12 rows or whatever. In my own personal operation, it makes no sense for me to start buying all that stuff. I lose a few acres every year. I'm getting older. The corn planters I have work fine.
Yep.
And they're here and they're all paid for. So if I'm gonna survive, I have to use that stuff for a while. Now, if everybody starts to expand, and if for some reason they pick up some ground or the kids want to and do, then we might have to. Yeah, we need to get moving faster. But right now, with what we're doing, the machinery I got's going to have to work. And I have to do it that way. Because I ain't going out and borrowing a bunch of money to buy new machinery.
Well, a lot of guys are only farming ground to make machinery payments. That's it.
Kind of.
Well, what?
I guess. I don't know. But
Well, and what's dangerous about that was I can remember being a young farmer, and you could take when I do my balance sheet, right? You could pretty much take the machinery values and just photocopy it because it was all worn out junk that was worth,
Right.
like an 856 International was worth the same amount,
right.
For decades and decades. Well, when you're buying it, so it was like as long as you were making your payments, you were gaining equity. Where with this newer stuff,
Right.
like I didn't know about depreciation, actual real depreciation on equipment until I bought, like when I bought my 8200 tractor, that was the first time I actually realized tractors can go down in value.
Right.
Because,
Right.
if you bought like around here, say a 4240, that price was actually, the only time that price would fluctuate would be with the milk prices. If the milk prices got really high, somebody was looking for another tractor.
Right.
But other than that, I
Exactly.
mean, it was like they were worth, say $18,000.
Right. Milk hits 18, then you see a new few pickups sitting around.
Right.
Right.
Well, heck, I remember Tom Holdorf telling me one time there was I forget, milk prices got really high and like Ellsworth Equipment, they sold like 50 disc binds.
Right.
Like one summer.
Yep. Well, that's. Yeah, if you wanted the economy would take care of itself if the dairy farms and the small farms were.
Well, you give a farmer $1, that's not $1 to spend. That's
Right.
a 20% down payment.
Yeah, I just the way things have changed so fast, that we dragged that old 50 out of the corn crib there. We parked stuff in there. And I was just looking at it, I was like, and it wasn't that long ago, twice a year you had to put the sickle mower on it and cut the roads for the town roads. You'd put the sickle mower on and just cut the length of it twice a year, and then on the 5th year, then the county would shave everything. But that was kind of our jobs as kids, 7th, 8th grade through till I was probably 25, we'd have that on and go cut ditches. And every town road, and I kind of, if it was working good and stuff, you know, it was kind of enjoyable. And there was 25, 30, 40 cow barns on every one of them roads.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and it was just, okay, it's 100 degrees out and this guy's got his cows and you can see him. And I mean, it was all, now there ain't a one left. And it wasn't that long ago is what I'm getting at.
Well, and we went from, you know, I think I always say that drives me nuts is when when there was an auction, like where the 40/20 came from.
Right.
That guy, you know, died, and then Matt started milking there. Right. Like so when somebody would retire, another person would step in and farm there. Now, somebody quits farming, the buildings are just knocked down, whatever, the house is there, and then the land is farmed by another big operation. And it's not healthy for the rural economy.
It's not. And no matter really how it is, if at some point you got to let the next generation take over. And my dad was great. But he wasn't really going to let you just take over. So when I got older, I got thinking, I'm going to get my kids started when they're younger. So when I'm 50 and 60, they're already established. So far, that's kind of went to hell, but not really totally either. You know what I mean? Nothing ever goes the way you think it's going to go.
Yeah.
But my dad was like, this is my farm, and I'm going to run it.
Yeah.
And he was a great guy. I'm not picking on him. I don't think he thought he was ever going to die. You know what I mean? Right. It's like, I'm going to do this to the point where he was getting to where he couldn't do all the work and needed the next generation, but was kind of scared to let him go because, you know, it's scary. You go broke, you lose shit, you lose the farm, blah, 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 blah. But then I was thinking when I started having kids, it was get them going earlier and just let them fit in where they want to.
Yeah.
You know, you can't force them to farm, and you're not gonna, but they gotta do something with it, you know, without letting it all fall down, whether they rent it or.
Yeah.
Somehow the family's got to keep these farms operating.
Well, yeah, I think it's better. Like the whole rural economy thing around here, people drive around and our roads are relatively good around here. Right. Our schools are good. And so you might take a look at Pierce County and say, well, gosh, you know, the farm economy in Pierce County is really strong, but it has nothing to do with the farm economy. It's all people building houses and the tax base from people moving in. The farm economy in Pierce County is kind of crap because when we were kids, how many farm equipment dealerships were in Pierce County?
Oh, my God.
And now there's none.
Right.
You know, how many feed mills?
Right.
There's one.
Right. There's River Falls and Prescott each had a mill like when we were kids. Yeah. If we had extra corn in the fall, we'd have 2 gravity boxes hooked up or his grain truck and combine, and you just go to Prescott with it.
Yeah.
You know, and it was so handy. Now everything is so Walmart effecty. Like, it's just huge.
Yeah, there's, you know, to get actual feed mill, I think Plum City is the only one left in the, you know, that's crazy to think that.
Right, you can't go to River Falls and find anything for the farm anymore.
Well, that is the least farm community.
And it used to be, I don't know, they had River Falls days and the tractor pull, and you're all lined up at the feed mill weighing tractors. It was so fun.
Yep.
And harmless fun, you know. Yeah. That was just and that was like our vacation for the whole summer.
Yeah.
Was the River Falls tractor pull. I mean,
well, and the fair.
The fair too.
Yeah.
Both, but River Falls days now is just nothing. I mean,
no,
not like it used to be. I mean, they used to have the streets were lined with businesses were out there trying to peddle stuff and cooking hamburgers and fishing clinics down by the river and big fair and tractor pull, and you go screaming through town, and now it's just But everything's gotten that way. It's
Well, it's what's amazing. River Falls has got one of the top UWA college. The dairy program is one of the best in the country,
right.
and yet you'd never even know that that's a egg college. That River Falls is an egg town. I mean, when they took Cascade Avenue and put roundabouts in it, they pretty much made it so you weren't taking farm equipment through there.
Right.
You know?
Unless you're LD Hooper, just go.
Yeah, might as well.
How do you want me to get there? Just go through town. All right.
Yeah. Like,
we made her.
yeah. It's just kind of sad to see, but I mean, obviously things change and they can't always stay the same.
Right.
But you know, we went from all these small farms that had cows everywhere, and then so like here, so your dad milked 40 cows, and they added silos, so they increased their production without really growing the whole farm.
Right.
And then somewhere along the way, we just went, well, here, let's just make the farm massive. And there weren't little improvements to get more out of what was there. And that's stupid to me.
Right.
Right or wrong, I don't,
Yeah, I don't know. You can't pick on guys for changing. I mean, if you don't move with them a little bit, you're going to get run over too.
Yeah, for sure.
But it just seems like it, not just in the farms, the whole thing is just so huge out of control. Like your dealers and your
Well,
your Chevrolet dealers. If you're going to still be a Chevrolet dealer, you have to have your showroom just how they want it, and just things like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just
think when you wanted when you needed a John Deere part as a kid, if they didn't have it how many different John Deere dealerships could you hit?
There was in the 80s, there was Interstate, Hart, Myers,
Yep.
Pulfus,
Cannon Falls.
Was there one in Ellsworth?
No, but you'd had Ellsworth Equipment, which Durant was sending parts up
Right,
to.
Durant.
And the funny thing is, so like all those stores we rattled off were independent.
Right.
So
they were Stanley
Stanley
Meyer owned it.
Right.
You know.
Durant Implement was Sig Weiss's dealership. Like there was, and now there's still quite a few John Deere dealers, but it's two groups that own all of it. And
that's the way everything is. And I feel like the country was more healthier when the grocery stores and the hardware stores and the implements and the Chevy dealers were family owned, the bakeries and everything. Whether you're farming or doing that growing up, you have to go help your dad sort nails today. You know what I mean? They had their kids in there helping them in these businesses, and now it's not like that. And some kids, I feel, are just growing up, not learning some things that are very important to learn when they're little.
Yeah.
Safety and responsibility. And I'm not picking on the kids. There are a lot of wonderful people and kids at the schools and stuff, but I think back when you were forced, not forced, but go to the barn when you're little, you're learning a lot. Well, you're learning a lot. When we grew up, there was a system here in the family from when we were very little, and Mom took care of the house. Well, all three sisters helped in the house, and me and Katie milked, and Ben, we all did chores. So we all kind of had our thing.
Yep.
And from when Dad was young, through us getting through our high school years, the farm ran real smooth. Not that we weren't screaming and throwing shit at each other once in a while, but we were in for breakfast, dinner, and supper every day.
Yep.
The clothes were all clean and the house was spotless. The chores were done. We just had our system. It took a team there,
Yeah.
All of a sudden we started growing up and moving off, and Mom and Dad are getting older, and things go backwards because there's not enough help around. But we learned a lot growing up that way. Well, from, fixing stuff in the barn when you were little and learning it through knowing it when you were getting out of high school already.
Yeah. Well, were you planning originally when you graduated to come back to the farm?
I never once when I was in high school, when I graduated, I was going to come and dairy farm.
And
That's what I was going to do. I graduated and Dad's like, Murphy's got a job for you down there. He says, go work there. So I went down to Cernahouse.
Yep.
And I worked at Cernahouse, which was a great place to work. It is. If you need a job, go there. There's great people to work for. I didn't want to work in town. And Dad was getting older. And you could see things slipping. Just not being mean, but there wasn't enough help around. But he just did not want me to take over the farm at that point. Because he was probably young enough yet, And so we worked down there. And then I one day just said, I'm 24. I'm gonna farm.
Yep.
And I just did. And I didn't take over his farm. Me and Mackenzie got married and we took over that farm and we started farming away at it. And for a while, my dad didn't like that because.
Oh, really?
Well, I think he wanted me to be a farmer. I think he was really scared that we were going to never have any money and lose everything. Well, I never have any money, but I haven't lost everything yet.
Yeah.
Well, almost a couple times, but we keep plugging away at it. But it seems like in all these operations, they're missing that young teamwork. Or it's gone away or something, or it's because there is no money in farming, they just move on or what? I don't know.
Well, and like I said, our generation was told not to farm. Like we were discouraged from it.
Kind of, yeah.
Well, and did you graduate with Cookie and Dick Jr. same year?
I'm 92. They're 2 years older than me.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So Cookie and Dick Jr. Junior stayed on the farm the whole time, didn't he? But Cookie went to Value for a while. And
he worked at Value, and then he milked his own cows where he lives.
Yep.
Patrick was at the farm.
Then he started working for Kevin.
Then he went to Kevin's, but then Aaron was there.
Yep.
And Aaron did a lot of chores.
Yep. Yeah. We were kind of discouraged from it. And
I don't think it was that. I don't think my dad didn't want me to not be a farmer. I just think he knew that if I was working in town that I'd have money and I wouldn't have to worry about what he'd been worrying about all his life.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know.
So then when you, that whole deal with Gene down there, then you moved the cows from Gene's back to here then. Your dad had quit by then?
Yeah. About 2 years before that, I started renting the farm here from my dad, and he didn't like that either. Because he didn't want to let go of the reins. That bothered him bad. And my mom, finally, she's like, at some point you got to let these guys go. And we did, and then he kind of got over it. Then we had that stupid deal at Gene's there.
Yep.
We had to move everything. So we started roaring shit over here, and this is his little farm, it's his territory.
Right.
And we started moving stuff, and it just drove him nuts. And then once we got it all going, then he was like, it's all right, but I don't know, it's just the way it was. I put new steel in the barn before we moved the cows over here, and he was mad at me for tearing out his old stalls. I mean, that were shot when I learned how to milk.
Right.
You know what I mean? It was like he put them in there and they're not leaving,
Yeah.
So we had to stomp around, listen to him kind of crabby about that for a while. Once you got the new stalls in there and the mats in there and the cows would walk in and lay down all comfy, he was like, I should have done that years ago.
Yeah.
That's how way it is everywhere though, kind of, but.
Did Ben or Adam ever want to farm?
Adam farms quite a bit. He owns the farm that Grandpa and Steve run, and the beef cows are over there.
Okay.
He takes full care of the beef cows, him and AJ. If it wasn't for Adam and AJ and Zach Frikowski and my kids and stuff, they come. It gets kind of discombobbled because they're in school and working full time, but without them, I wouldn't be done planting at all.
Yep.
So they farm quite a bit. Ben, he did a lot of farming. He works at Coke now. He's there all the time.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I mean,
Yep.
You hardly ever see the guy. And I don't know if when he got old enough to not have to be at the farm, he went and working and didn't farm. So if he liked it, I suppose he'd be farming.
Yeah.
He helps a lot. He's got a shop down there that comes in super handy because in the fall, when we're combining and stuff, there's a spot to plug everything in without bringing everything down to the farm and things like that. Willie helps a lot driving tractors and stuff. Well, so we're all pretty involved, really.
Well, and he restored your grandpa's old 4020 then too, didn't he?
Yeah, that was another big day when Grandpa bought the 4020 with the cab on it to help plow.
Yeah, with power shift.
No, that one's a synchro.
Oh, that one is?
And my dad bought a power shift in 67 or 68. That was the big tractor in the neighborhood. They couldn't believe you could pull 4 bottoms or 5 bottoms in 4th gear.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, because then, I mean, that's funny with the 4020s because Tim and Dick own the 14020 together. And then I suppose their farms just got too big that, then Tim bought his own, right?
Right, I think so.
And then you guys had 4020s, and then the Hooperts had 4020s. There was, I mean, how many 4020s between you and your cousins do you think there was at one time?
Well, I think there's 5 of them here. Just here between Ron's and ours and Zach's. And then, back then it was just, even today, maybe not anymore, but back then it was just the right size track. I mean, you could put a chopper on there and chop corn to beat hell, and you could go cultivate with it. I mean, that's why they liked them. They were just enough power for everything and not so huge you could do cultivating and cutting hay and bale. You know what I mean? It just was the right size. And that's what they got so popular for right here.
Well, that's why I always said, like with the 4440, that size tractor was so beloved around here because, once again, you could do the big jobs. It had enough power, but it was small enough you could do small jobs.
Right.
Without,
Right. They came in real handy for that era,
I was thinking about that yesterday. So now today, what's left of dairy in Pierce County, I bet about 5 choppers total chop 90% of the feed for the dairy in Pierce County. If you go back, say 40 years ago, or go back to the 70s, I bet there were hundreds of choppers.
Yeah.
Literally hundreds of choppers. You think about,
John Deere, I think, eliminated the pull-type chopper.
Yeah, they did that probably 5-6 years ago already, I think.
And everybody had one.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all we did. I was ram around all summer chopping hay.
Yeah, 3800s, 38s,
yeah,
3940s, and then New Holland, you had your 782s and your 770s because Dick had a New Holland.
Yeah, so did we. We had an 890. He had a 38 that had a screen in it.
Yep.
That thing pulled so hard.
Well, I'm sure.
We'd be in the. We were out here, and I was a kid. That thing was just bellering away, and I pulled the power takeoff down on the 4230, and I about got killed. I was a little kid. Oh. That 38 pulled really hard with the screen in it.
I'm sure.
And we're out here, and I was standing in the cab with my dad, and he was in low gear, and that thing was just eating. And I stopped it, stuff full of hay. But I remember that's what I learned how to chop was at the 38. And then we got the New Holland, and it just pulled so much easier. And it chopped just as nice. I mean, they made them a little better as they went,
Yep.
obviously. But we got so much, we could chop so much faster. When we got so much more done when he got that. I remember that. When we got that New Holland, you could chop in third gear no matter where you were. That other one pulled so hard you could hardly
Well, I remember
get anything done.
me and Tom were sitting in Dick's yard one day, and he had a New Holland blower. I don't know, it was a 28 probably, I suppose, and then some H&S chopper boxes. There was a New Holland hay bine and the New Holland chopper sitting there hooked to the 4020, and he looked at us and he goes, he says, I bought all of that, he said, in 1979 in one shot. He goes, it was that good at that time.
Right. Right.
He's like, and here it is 17 years later, and it's still the same equipment.
My Uncle Dick's famous thing was always, he goes, when I got going, he says, I always thought every year would get a little better. He goes, it just gets worse.
Yeah.
And it really wasn't. It really was never that bad.
No.
You know what I mean? Some things really sucked, and I don't know. But they did do. I mean, they were younger. They could work a lot harder. But like my dad, he bought that 7,000 John Deere brand new.
Yep.
In 1980, and he had pretty nice equipment when he was young, and that 1240, he didn't like it because the gauge wheels were in the back.
Yeah.
And he had bought that Bryles farm. They had a lot to do. And one morning he's like, what are you doing today? After chores. And I go, well, I said, Mom's taking us to town. We're getting new tennis shoes. Oh, all right. Okay. And we were all fired up to go get new tennis shoes, So we leave after chores in the morning, and we come pulling in the yard, and he's got the JS3010 hooked up to a brand new 7,000 corn planter in front of the shop. And I'm in the car looking at my shoes, and I look up and I'm like, a new corn planter? Well, he asked me what I was doing to see if I wanted to go with him to get his new corn planter, but I said I was getting new shoes, and then he said, okay, he never told me.
Yeah.
So I was so mad at him. I was like bawling. I'm like, you didn't tell me you were getting a new corn planter.
Yeah.
Well, he never had nothing new, But
right.
And it's just one of them things you remember, and it's the same one I'm using today.
Yeah. Well, that still work.
They plant corn to beat hell. Like I said before, I can't justify doing all the changing unless the kids pick up a whole bunch of ground somewhere.
Yeah.
At my age and the acres we got, so. And they work just fine.
Oh yeah.
But
they'll get the job done, and
it's just some of those things over those years you remember. It's like we got a brand new corn planter. That's like against my dad's religion to buy anything new. You know what I mean?
Well, I remember like Dick, there's a couple of pieces of equipment that he had that were like, because a lot of that stuff, the hay and equipment stuff was old,
Right.
But I remember he never really had a nice corn planter. He'd run like that 694.
Yeah.
But he had that pretty nice Gale round baler.
Yeah.
And then he had that 5100 International grain drill.
Yeah.
Which, because everybody else...
bought them brand new, that stuff.
Yeah, because everybody else is running around with a Van Brunt or something.
Right.
And he had that, one of the few really nice pieces of equipment he had. Right. And I remember everybody in the family would come and grab that grain drill from him.
Right. Yeah, that's what would happen with Dad, too. He bought that 4020, and he had it dualed up, and in the springtime, it was always disappearing. Because he had a brand new 4020 with duals on it and a Pittsburgh digger behind it.
Yeah.
And versus when they grew up, they had Grandpa had an A and 2 B John Deeres. That's what they farmed everything with.
Yeah, that one A.
And so when they got that, it was like, oh my God.
Right.
Steve was like, you'd crawl on that thing and you'd work a field up in about a third of the time. He goes, everybody just loved it.
Well, that one A, we're going to try and get Tim to do a video with it for sure, but it was...
Was that 34?
Yeah. Like he went something like
that,
because I think your grandpa went to buy a new A, and then didn't buy it that fall. Went to buy it in the spring, and the price had gone up a bunch, and he was mad about it. So they bought that
probably, yeah.
old 34A.
Right.
You know, no, that equipment it just took off, and
It did.
it's got so much bigger now, and once it started, it just
Really, like, just about that time, the 4020s came around, and all of a sudden, just
yeah.
4 rows were getting thrown away. We're 6 rows now. And like I said, it happened so fast.
Oh,
It's like I don't know.
it was so funny.
I don't
like,
know if we're just in a bad area or if it's the whole. I mean, we're so close to the cities that it's easy to dump land for a big,
yeah.
check. But
Well, when I remember when Don bought a
Or-
6 row, and you went from 4 row wide to 6 row narrow, you really didn't. You gained like maybe a row. That's all you were really gaining, was maybe 1 row, and everybody thought they were really growing, and it's like it was kind of a wash. And somebody that had a 12 row, I mean, you were like, holy
What
smokes,
in
that is
yeah,
just and now there's a lot of 24-row planters around.
yeah, it's insane how fast it changed.
But now corn planters sold tractors because these guys buy these big planters with all this technology, and they can't pull it with what they had, so then they got to buy a new tractor. And
Yeah, I don't know. They do good. I don't know. It just seems so wild. My dad bring me out to mat rolls one time to get I don't know, we were working on something here or there, and the corn planter was in the shed. My dad hobbles in, he looks, he goes, "You need all that to plant corn?" It's all folded up.
Yep.
But yeah, I don't know.
It's funny though. A lot of those guys, like your cousin Aaron, would rather be out on a 2-cylinder, probably plant with a 730 in the 4-row.
Yeah, he would. He loves that stuff. He'll put the 720 on the blower just to piss Matt off.
Yeah.
That's what he says. He goes, "I'll put the 720 on the blower, see if I can piss Matt off today." He goes, "I like to watch the front tires bounce on the ground."
Oh, that's
He's joking, of
Yeah.
course, but him and Tim like to do that
oh yeah.
with the old tractors.
Well, and that there's nothing better than like working a 2-cylinder diesel hard, and you get the flame that comes up, and you actually watch it flicker with each.
Which he,
Yes, it
yeah. Right.
No, I got to get my that if it's gonna rain for 6 days. I was thinking about that today. I should probably get the 720 in the shop and start. I think the flywheel worked loose and lost one of the thrust washers. Is I think what happened, because the whole crank wants to walk,
Yeah.
and I don't know what the best way to. I tried bucking the flywheel up. I don't know what the best way is to.
Probably have to take it right out right? Take the crankshaft right out of it and have them check it and
I don't know if you need to
put
do.
it back in. The bearing's not loose, or
I think somebody said the thrust bearing or thrust washers will just drop out. You can get them back in there.
oh,
So I don't know if you go on the.
I don't know. I guess I got mine all tore apart, but I ain't got it down that far.
I was gonna actually ask your Uncle Tim because he probably would.
He would know.
Yeah,
He worked on a lot of them.
him and Dick both were really good with the diesels because
Right.
a 2-cylinder gas is pretty simple, but there's a little more to the.
Yeah, they didn't cheat anything when they put them together. I got mine all tore apart, and everything is, and it's all iron.
Yeah.
I mean, just packed in with the pony motor on it, and
Well,
yeah, they didn't cheat when they put them together. And there's some things you got to know when you put them back in with the injectors and stuff.
Yeah, because the injectors are kind of what actually just make it run, because there isn't really an injection pump to speak of. They're kind of
there's a fuel pump on the left side.
Yeah.
That when you put that together, it's got to be just right, or it won't. It moves it somehow. I don't even know myself, but
Yeah. Like,
and I might have to get Tim or somebody to come and help me when I get to that point, so I don't have it all screwed up.
yeah, because there's a trick to them tractors, but they'll run on just
2 gallons an hour.
yeah.
Ain't that funny how they started out and they made them run on 2 gallons an hour, and then the 40-20 was 4, and then the 42-30 is like 8.
Yeah.
You'd think they could make them a little more efficient as they got newer. I mean,
Yeah. Well, the fuel economy record of like the 820 stood for
right.
30 some years.
They got a lot of power out of very little fuel.
Right. Well, and people don't realize that when they see a 2-cylinder, they think, oh, that little thing. And it's like, hell, the engine in that 720 is bigger than an 806.
Right.
You know, they're two, giant pistons that garbage cans in there.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. The farming thing sure has changed a lot. I guess there ain't nothing you can do.
No.
Ride with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. We do a lot. I mean, as far as working together, we do a lot more of that than people think. I mean, if it wasn't for Dick and them guys and Patrick and Matt and Aaron and Eldie and all these guys, I mean, I wouldn't be here farming. I mean, when I got jammed up, they're the first ones here helping.
Yep.
I mean, Patrick wouldn't have hauled, several times I was way behind and I just call, come and help, and they do, and we're back and forth all the time. So we kind of farm together more, not strictly, but there's a lot of favor doing that gets done a lot.
Yeah.
That really helps each other out more than you think. As far as the family farm thing goes, I mean, when we get going in the fall, Steve will show up. Comes in very handy when you're combining, and he'll jump in one, or if something's broke, he'll start putzing with it. Travis and Phil,
Yep.
they got me dialed in on the seed thing.
Yep.
Travis just takes care of it. I just plant what he tells me.
Yeah, he's good at it.
I mean, he's like, we're putting I call it foo-foo dust. What is it? The
Pivot?
The pivot bio.
Yeah.
I told him, get me my seed and put the foo-foo dust on it. Okay. And he does, and he kind of knows the ground, so he kind of gets a seed that'll jive with the ground, He's always got a wagon for me, full, I just got to go get it.
Yep.
Stuff like that, and it all helps. If you want each other to survive, you still got to help each other.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
and that's a lot of that goes on. I mean, Patrick broke a rim on a combine. It was a Sunday. Me and Mabel went down there in Bay City somewhere and helped. What's his mechanic? Kenny Mechanic, I call him.
okay.
We worked on that all afternoon, and we got him going. I don't know. So it ain't. We all work together still.
Yeah.
It really helps in the end. You get jammed up. I don't know how many times Dick and Dickie and Luke and them guys came down when I was all jammed up. Helped out.
Yeah.
Chasing the Angus bulls out of the Big River Creek and stuff. Uncle Dick's in there, 65 years old. Come on, bull. Come on. Me and Dickie got shotguns. Yeah. And he goes, just talk to him. Just talk to him. And we're like, get the fuck out of the woods. But I wouldn't, I just stuff like that all the time. It's just all the time.
Oh, yeah.
Back and forth helping each other.
Wow, you help because
I mean, if something was burning and falling down, Norman Hoopert was the first one there.
Oh.
You know what I mean? And in the 80s when them storms blew everything down, I mean, everybody just packed together and got stuff straightened up the best they could.
Norman would give anybody the shirt off his
Right.
back as far as like
They all would.
yeah.
All them guys would have,
Yeah.
And that's talk about sucky times like in '88. I mean, everybody was creeped out, and I was 15, I suppose, and Tim had, talk about saving asses. There was just shitloads of set aside out there.
Yep.
And they talked him in. I don't know if Tim did, but they released it for the drought. Anyway, everybody's tractor and hay bine and any sort of baler we had was out there for the summer, cutting all these set aside fields. And me and Dick and Matt and Aaron and Patrick, we were having the time of our lives.
Yeah.
We're you sit on a 488 all day long and cut a little, and then all of a sudden you got four of them, and we're just swooping.
Yeah.
It was just cool as shit. And we were having fun and joking and farting around all the time, but the dads weren't. They were nervous,
Oh, 88 was, I mean, it was rough, but
it was like the worst summer in the world, but it's the one you mostly remember.
Yeah.
Kind of, because everybody was hunkering in on this disaster thing, and it saved ass we were feeding that shit to the milk cows. We had no choice, it was just.
88 was the year everybody got to see what the floorboards and the haymow actually looked like.
Exactly. We had this shed was forked right out to the floor. Grandpa Roll's barn, me and Dad would go over there every day with the pickup and fill the back end of the pickup off the floor of that barn.
Yeah.
It's exactly right. We had that barn cleaned right out.
Yep. There wasn't a corn stalk left
Nothing.
anywhere. I mean,
Tim had to, in order to cut the set aside, you had to leave like an 8-foot strip every so many 100 yards or whatever for the pheasants.
Yep.
And it was like, we're human beings. We're trying to survive, and we have to do all this extra work to leave a strip for the pheasants, just stupid. Tim was doing it. He had the stakes, and he was measuring everything out. And it was me and Dick and Patrick and Dave Roll, and we were cutting hay. And my dad told us when we got done, he goes, go down that road, you'll see Tim. Swing everything over. We're all flying down the road, cool as shit, and we wheel into this place. Truck was down there. He had it all staked out, and we wheel in, swing everything over, started cutting hay and cut all the stakes off. Oh, he was standing at the end of that field just hollering. We all stopped, and Dickie goes, I think Uncle Tim is mad. We didn't realize we cut all his stakes off that he had marked. But them guys were kind of creeping out, and we were having fun. But
I remember Don saying that really ended up pretty good because the milk price went high, so that you could kind of afford to.
Probably. But that summer when everything was planted and you didn't have anything coming in the silos, it's a creepy feeling.
Oh, yeah.
I remember combining where Ron and Katie lived. Dad rented that from Greg Elwood, and I remember combining that. Back in there, I don't know, there was about 15 acres back in there, and I combined the whole thing, and the hopper wasn't even full.
Yeah.
So you're like, we got a lot of winter here,
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah, I remember all the set aside got released everywhere, and then
we hauled a lot of that home, and Tim set that all up out there, and then I don't know, we had cutting and baling, and Jay and them guys would just start hauling bales, and they kind of just divvied them up and hauled them.
So Jay was even getting some of that hay out there?
Jay and Jamie and David were out there a lot that year. Yeah.
Huh. Well, that neighborhood, like where Tim's farm is really good land. But that neighborhood up in them hills, that tended to be wetter ground. That was.
I guess that's what Aaron said, that that one is sitting there in the corner before you go to Matt's. And I said, how come you guys ain't farming that? He goes, well, it's in government something or CRP. But he goes, it might as well be. He says, it's so hard to farm that.
Yeah.
He said, it just never dries out.
Yeah.
There is some spots, I guess.
Well, there's springs up in there.
Springs in the ground that come out.
Yeah, because we've tiled for Knutson's up in there that, I mean, literally.
Does the tiling correct the spring?
If you can hit where the spring is, absolutely. But I've got some ground. I got a farm where there's springs. And last year, when we got so wet, those springs were actually, so the tile lines would be here, where the spring comes out here. The water would boil out of the ground, and then it'd just go hit the tile line, and then. So I had one spot, like this is the
go back
spring
and
there.
Connect the tile between the spring.
Yeah, that's. But it comes down from so deep in the ground. That tile's in the ground 3 feet. Well, that water's coming up from who knows where.
Hundreds of feet.
And yeah, so this is the whole area where the spring is, and here's the tile line. I could drive the sprayer right next to it on perfectly good ground. You moved over just a little bit, and she's gone.
Yeah, we did that back here, didn't we? When they finished this gravel pit up, and this is just a mess in here. It's full of rocks and gravel, but till we get fencing and cattle back, I planted it.
Yep.
And it's just, it'll grow stuff, but it's just rocks like this all over. And I go over the knoll. I planted the whole thing. I go over the knoll, about the size of the tractor, right down the axles. The water pushes out of the ground in that spot.
Yeah.
And I don't think it'll ever, I think it's just going to do that.
Probably, yeah.
But that's why back here was pasture and not farmed, because it's kind of grouchy,
Yeah.
But
no, this neighborhood has some wetter ground.
yeah, this is a really good farm. It's just like, if you get these kind of rains before the corn is up, it just struggles.
Yeah.
If you get it planted fit and it gets out of the ground, you're okay.
Yeah.
But get it planted and then you get 3 inches of rain, and it ain't the whole thing. It's kind of down in the lower spots, but it makes it mind numbing. It should be tiled. The problem is it can't be tiled until the water runs are fixed, can it? Can't tile into a filled up. I mean, some of these water runs, they're not bad, but they should be fixed.
Yeah.
And then run your tile lines in it so when it gets there, it can go. This farm don't have an erosion problem. It's got a drainage problem.
Yeah. And then you get just south of here on the other side of 29, and that.
It's gorgeous.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go over the hill, and it's gorgeous.
Yeah.
I don't know, the glacier. 3 glaciers stopped in one spot right on this farm, and it was fact from the colleges.
Really?
What do they call that? Or the rock finders at the college?
Geologists.
Geologies. And they studied this. And there was one came from this way, one came straight this way, and one came from like South and North Dakota way. And they all kind of stopped right here. That's true they've studied it. That's why. And then it got stopped here, and then for some reason it must have been pushing big rocks and weird shit and stopped here, or where these gravel hills are and stuff. You go over the hill and you go over to Fiedler's, and that whole flats is just gorgeous. Black dirt, not very many rocks.
Yep.
And it's only a mile away.
Right. Well, that's what the thing about our area. Well, they call it the driftless area, or we're the very top of the driftless area, and it's like, yeah, the glaciers didn't flatten our ground out the way they did, but there's some beautiful farmland around, and then there's right wherever it's just poor.
Yeah, it's kind of all over that way, I think.
Yeah.
That's why Wisconsin was the dairy state, because they farmed the good pieces of it and pastured the rough spots.
Yeah.
And especially, I guess, if you're on a 2-cylinder, nowadays they have such huge machinery they can kind of woof through it, or you're tiling it and straightening it out.
Yep.
But you go back in there with an A and it's muddy, you're not going to get.
No.
That's why the rougher spots were pastured and they made milk out of it. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's common sense, but
Yeah. Good hills.
But there was all kind. I mean, they took a lot of gravel out of here, and then there's. I mean, they had found dinosaur bones and everything in that
Really?
hill. He's got it. What's Rodewalt?
Okay.
Pete Rodewalt was a big rock. Loved finding crazy rocks, and rock is a rock to me, but he'd find them. He said that rock came from South Dakota. It's the only place there's these rocks.
Huh.
It got pushed with the glacier, so he just got a kick out of it. But
Because that's all limestone in the quarry, right?
well, it's just about when Rumka did this hill, he said he's never seen so many different materials in one hill.
Really?
You had to go from pure sand to clay to big stone crushing stuff back to sand. He was usually you get into a hill and it's either limestone or it's stuff you can make class 5 out of, or he was they had a real hard time screening it because the material changed so much down through it. Because they'd get into a spot that'd have clay in it and the clay would plug up their screener. But they have Rodewald has rocks and stuff in a museum in Madison somewhere that he took out that he had found in here, and I was up there one day and he showed me this bone. It was a dinosaur bone. And you could see it. It was like the ball.
Yep.
And it came down and it was full of marrow holes.
Really?
He goes, look at that. And he goes, it's a dinosaur bone. And I thought, wow, it's a dead cow or something. He had it looked at and it was. So there was a lot of neat shit pushed in there, but I mean, as far as history and that kind of stuff, but it was just a big dangerous hole to me because it kind of got bombshelled. The county opened it and they kind of left it, and then monarchs were in there and they kind of left it.
Did your grandpa sell that to the county for the pit?
The top of the hill and where my brother lives.
Yep.
When my grandpa retired, I think he pretty much made his retirement money selling gravel.
Oh.
It worked out real good for him because they redid Highway 29 in the 70s from Prescott to River Falls, and every ounce of it came out of that hill.
Oh, really?
My brother's, where that tower is.
Yep.
That hill went way over.
Huh.
Davies made the material out of that pit, and it was right there by the highway, so it.
Yep.
Yeah, he was getting paid for gravel. He was getting paid for gravel from the county to do that highway. It really helped him out a lot.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I suppose you got to go to the neighbors.
We got to go over to
them.
Peterson's to help set up for their dairy breakfast.
Yeah. So it's Pierce County Dairy Breakfast tomorrow, which
They're about the only ones left.
there ain't many left. There really aren't. Start rattling.
There was 7 on this road when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Now there's not a one.
Yeah, because you had Mosts.
Clint Moss, us, Jay, Mozovs. What was their names I can't remember their names in the corner. They did quit before I was very young. And then Goodwin on the end.
Okay.
Was it Danny Goodwin? Right? Was on the end. Who am I missing? Aki's milked for a while. Oh, Harry milked for a while. Johnson. But Mos and Dad and Jay and Mozovs were the big ones. Or the ones that were here a long time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, and then every little road off of this, there was.
I sold some hay to this guy. Donnie Bang. You probably know him. But anyway, he told me he started when he was young. He hauled milk for Bob Donnelly. And he goes, granted, the trucks weren't as big, but he goes, I had 2 loads into the creamery, and I could still see the Capitol.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just every boom,
Oh
boom,
yeah.
boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom.
Bob's route was just. He didn't put any miles on it. It was just all
Right
right
there.
around it, and
Yeah.
just keep filling the truck up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Now
Now
these
there's
guys.
nothing. Or I mean, it's just
Well, yeah, the creamery's getting milk from all over.
yeah. It ain't really a co-op anymore, is it?
That still is, but
Kind of.
it's just. Yeah, who'd have thought you wouldn't have Hastings anymore?
Well, yeah, it's so bizarre the way them and how it was so fast. Like in
Yeah.
the 2000s, Hastings and Ellsworth were out here fighting over milk.
Right?
Not really fighting, but trying to,
Oh yeah.
several times between the two of them were stopping. Can we get your milk? Could we, And there was still a lot of them. And within 10 years, they all dropped off.
Yeah. Now that if you can get a creamery to take you, you're lucky.
Right. Yeah. If one of them goes, let's milk 30 cows. I don't know if they'd even pick it up.
Yeah.
But
No, it's a whole different deal. But yeah, dairy breakfast. Did Peterson's get their manure thing going yet?
I don't know if it's going yet, but I know they put the lines in. They must put gas lines in under the road. Don't they take gas out of there to heat? They piping it somewhere because
Okay.
I don't know exactly how they're doing it or what's going on there. But last week they did a bunch of line work across that corner.
Okay.
A corner of that farm over to E. So they must be getting close to making product out of there.
Okay.
They're all the food waste from the restaurants and the cow shit and everything. Brad wanted to know if we wanted manure because he could pipe it all the way over here.
Right.
He said they'd go across. They got to get permission, but they can run. He goes, we could pipe manure all the way over to your farm if you wanted to buy manure. So they'd pump it and knife it in.
Yeah, because they were talking about having to even need lagoons. Like some of these guys, I think I was talking to Jay, and he was saying they were gonna maybe want to use his pit to put.
Oh, sure.
To be able to haul for storage
and then pump out of them later.
Yeah. So I don't know.
I don't know. It just seemed like it was a lot easier when you ran the manure out in the spreader and went out with it.
Right.
On all these little, it seems. I don't know how that's more efficient.
Well, no, and they got that one down by Grange Hall. There was hauling all the way up. They were hauling manure to Emerald because they didn't have anywhere to go with it.
And them guys, they do so much work, but it seems I don't understand how it's more efficient.
I don't think it is.
Then what's behind it?
I think once you get that size, the only thing you can do
have
is
no choice,
right. Where that's why I always say the manure's gotten to the point where it's a burden, and we wanted every bit of our manure we had.
Exactly.
That was because you use that on the corn ground. You're gonna
right, and in the winter, he'd start piling it because we want it on the other end of the farm.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of times we would just start pushing it in a pile because everything was covered right across the road all the time. You could see it in the crops.
Oh yeah.
At some point, he'd be like, "We got to get manure on the other end of the farm," So if it was cold out and you didn't want to go back there, when I first was old enough to do chores, he had a heater house on his 50.
Yep.
That we took the shit out with. Well, it's cold on it, So you'd burn across the road and get it off and get home,
Well, that's where a manure pit on a small dairy really was a good thing.
It was.
You could.
Yeah, there was nothing bad about them.
And back then, I remember I asked a neighbor one time, when you built your pit, what'd you have to do? And he goes, dig a hole.
That's all they did. There was no. Yeah. There was nothing behind of it as long as it was holding it in the ground.
Yeah.
Now, Mike Fiedler said when he did their second pit, he said it was like they were building the Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
He said they were this and
Oh,
this
yeah.
and that, and then wanting them to tear out the old pit, and too many scientists around there, he said.
Yeah. Just seems like manure's gotten to be a headache.
Yeah, it's going to be if you're going to cram that much shit in one spot. But
Yeah, maybe we should spread the cows out, but
I don't know. I don't know how it's any more efficient. In some of these like, they milked with buckets at Grandpa's.
yep.
They put it in the cans. In the summer, the cans went out and they sat in the cow tank and Prescott, River Falls, and Ellsworth all had a creamery.
Yeah.
So Prescott got this milk, and they took it out of the cow tank and took it to, there had to be million cell counts and there had to be high bacteria counts in all those pails, and nobody got sick or hurt.
Right.
Not that you want to sell slop, but now it's like, got to be under 400 and things like that. I don't know. What are you gaining by all them rules?
I don't know. We lived on bulk tank milk, and I never had allergies. When I was younger, because I think like the cows would eat the pasture, and you got all that through. I never got allergies when I was younger. Now, gosh, the trees start, budding and stuff, and
Well, don't you think like the peanut allergies and the diabetes problem and all that stuff is from
probably
too preservatives and
yeah,
and I don't know, making everything got to be so perfect. Like,
and the whole unpasteurized milk thing. Like we used to drink it out of the bulk tank all the time,
every day.
And tuberculosis was what was originally, but there hasn't been TB in cattle because we vaccinated for Bang's disease and tuberculosis.
Right.
So if you didn't have that, gosh, I don't know. Like, because when you kill the bad bacteria and everything, you kill the good bacteria too.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But you guys better get over there.
Yeah, we got to go over to Peterson's and help them guys. I told them we'd go. So.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. We'll maybe be at the dairy breakfast tomorrow. I know my wife loves it. It's a good time yet. But all right. Well, thanks, John.
Yeah, super. Thank you.